So much. It's so exciting to be here. There's been so many great talks today, and yeah, happy to grace the stage with another, hopefully. Before we get started, I have a question. How many of your companies have launched or discussed launching a ChatGPT pilot in the past 6 months? Cool. And keep your hands up. Of those hands raised, how many of you believe that it's delivered business impact? Cool. And of the couple of hands up, how many of you believe it's improved your user experience? Nice. We have 4. Great. So today we're going to talk about hype, specifically seeing through the hype and how you as design leaders can help your organizations assess new trends in technology and determine which are the ones you want to respond to and integrate and which is just hype. So first, hello, I'm Rachel. I'm a design manager at Zalando, and I lead a team called The Studio. The Studio is a centralized design innovation lab where we work on strategic projects looking 2 to 5 years out into the future. I'm super lucky that I get to spend every day thinking about what comes next. But the biggest challenge of always looking forward is understanding what we should focus on. And tonight, I'm going to talk you through a 6-step process to help you do just that. But first, what does future strategy even look like? This is a question I get all the time, especially because we're a design team, not a biz dev team. And what I usually respond with is, well, if you had to guess the future today, what would you say? I usually hear something like this. There's a lot of talk about AI. We've talked enough about AI today. I won't discuss it more at this moment. So there's that huge topic. Then there's going to be people who talk about decentralization, blockchain, crypto, and NFTs. Some are going to want to talk about the built world and Internet of Things, wearables, the phygital experience. Whereas others want to talk about the digital world and think about metaverse and virtual reality and what's happening online. These are all really exciting trends in technology. They're buzzy and they're flashy. But just because there's buzz doesn't mean it's going to impact your products. And so if there's buzz but no impact, it's really just hype. Today, we want to talk about how to assess when it's something that you need to respond to versus when it's something that you could just leave on Twitter. So let's take a tangible example. I work at Zalando, which is the leading fashion e-commerce company in Europe. And so I think about fashion every day. And when you talk about the future, one of the topics that inevitably comes up is the metaverse. So let's use this as an example to ground the process we're going to discuss. Just to clarify, this is not a real Zalando use case. Zalando isn't like getting ready to launch in the metaverse. This is just an example for us to have something to hold on to. So if you look online about the future of fashion, it's going to look something like this. Everyone from Fast Company to Vogue is going to talk about fashion in the metaverse. Fashion in the metaverse is here to stay. We need to train fashion designers to be designing for the metaverse. We need digital twins of our products. We need to think about the social media experiences that can live online. We need to think about e-commerce for the metaverse. And if you work in the fashion space and you see this amount of content, your palms start to get sweaty and your throat restricts because you think, oh shit, we're behind. And if we're not leading, we're falling. In reality, when Pew Research speaks with metaverse experts, 54% believe it's going to have a massive consumer impact in the next 15 years, while 46% don't, which is split, and it means that nobody really knows. So what do you do as a designer? You look online and you see content about the fashion metaverse everywhere. You speak to experts and they say we're not there yet. Should your business respond? Seeing through the hype is a way to craft business strategy by evaluating market trends through a design lens. And we're going to talk about the 6 steps to do that. Those steps are to gather, digest, focus, provoke, craft, and iterate. These are terms that as a designer you should all be familiar with, but we're going to talk about it in a bit of a different context with a design futurism lens. So let's start walking through them with that concept of fashion in the metaverse as our grounding example. So first, we need to gather information on what's coming. When I first joined this team, I had a lot of imposter syndrome. Who am I to be leading these projects? I'm not a tech expert. I'm not a business expert. I don't know what these topics are, and I don't really like a lot of them. But the reality is that the future isn't a product of your personal opinion. And we need to remember why are designers best suited to be leading these projects. And it's because what I lack in engineering knowledge, I make up for in my expertise as a designer. I'm expert in research. I'm expert in asking the right questions. I'm expert in identifying insights, and I'm expert in seeing patterns. I'm expert in bringing together different people across the organization, bringing them into a room and getting them speaking the same language and aligned on a vision. And those are the skill sets we are going to use to develop better strategy. So in our first stage, we need to gather information from our internal leaders, trend reports, and our competitors. So what do those conversations look like? Well, from our internal leaders, we need to understand what are the emerging trends that excite you, and what are the risks that keep you up at night. Your business has hired experts, so you don't have to be one. What you need to do is extract their knowledge and make it accessible to the rest of the organization. Talking about the future, there's going to be personal opinions. People will have topics that they're most excited about. The sooner you assess what are the personal opinions in the room, the quicker you're going to be able to research them and bring the right knowledge available to all the others. So start with those conversations. Next, we want to look at trend reports. And I want to emphasize trend reports is not Wired, it's not TechCrunch, and it's not what's trending on Twitter. Trend reports are things put out by people like Amy Webb with the Future Today Institute. It's people whose job it is to assess vast market trends and being looking forward in the future. We want to understand where Future is placing their bets, and what are the topics that they're discussing that's not on our radar. That's the information you need to bring into the organization. And lastly, we have our competitors. Of course, we need to understand what are the bets competitors are making, and what's required of us to stay competitive. This is what we need to gather. We're essentially saying, what are the signals in the market that we need to be paying attention to as designers and as an organization? It's not our personal opinions, but it's a diverse variety of signals that's going to help us upskill our own knowledge. But it's a ton of content, and what do we do with it? We go to our next stage, which is after gathering signals from the market, we need to digest it through the lens of a hype cycle. So this is the Gartner hype cycle. Gartner is a standalone company that puts out this hype cycle. It's a way of assessing trends across industries. It could be tech, fashion, sustainability, e-commerce, what have you. And there's essentially two axes of a Gartner hype cycle. One is expectations. What's the expectation that we think a trend is going to grow to? And the x-axis is time. What is the life cycle and the journey that a trend is going to go on? Let's walk through these steps of a Gartner hype cycle, thinking about fashion in the metaverse. So we first start with an innovation trigger. Innovation trigger is saying what new technology or trend has just become available that's changing the landscape of what's possible. So in our metaverse example, we can think about virtual reality headsets. When those come to market, all of a sudden there's a new variety of possibilities that we can think about and design for. Or avatars. The ease and ability to create digital avatars creates new opportunities for personalization and customization. And so this technology being available is changing how we can design personal experiences for our users. After we move up our hype cycle and we come to the peak of inflated expectations, or essentially what is the peak moment of hype? And so here we can think about fashion NFTs. 2 years ago, everyone was having an NFT, from sneakers to luxury handbags. It was considered super important. It had high commodity value. It was essential for brand relationships. It was thought to deepen your relationships with the garments that you buy and own. But now, 2 years later, no one's talking about it. They've all lost their value. No one's really releasing new NFTs. And so we can safely say that was at the peak of its inflated expectation. Let's move down on our hype cycle. Then we hit the trough of disillusionment, the moment when reality hits. This is when we recognize that, hey, that tech darling that everyone was so excited about and we thought was the flashy new toy, actually there's some reality before it's ready to launch to the mass market. Maybe it's super expensive. Maybe the accuracy kind of sucks. Maybe VR headsets gives everyone motion sickness. And so yeah, it's exciting, but it's not really there yet. And that's okay. Because sure enough, with time, we're going to rise to our enlightenment slope. Our enlightenment slope is when we find the initial product market fit of a trend. Where is there moments of enlightenment? So we're not in a fashion metaverse yet, but our initial product market fits is that we see hybrid fashion shows where there's now digital experiences that complement the physical. Or we could talk about 3D clothing data. 3D clothing data is essential so that we can render garments in a metaverse. And so before we have mass data available, we're not going to be able to move forward. But companies are starting to bring more and more garment data online. Or we could look at gaming collaborations. Roblox and Minecraft have partnered with all types of fashion brands to develop gaming e-commerce experiences. And it's not the brands you might think. Yes, there might be Adidas and Puma, but there's also Burberry, Balmain, and Carolina Herrera. That's all being sold and marketed to Gen Alpha. So not only do we see Gen Alpha being raised with this expectation of shopping for fashion online, but it's an idea that it's not just for low-cost brands, it's all types of fashion experiences that you should experience digitally. After our enlightenment slope, we're going to hit our productivity plateau, where there's broad consumer adoption of a trend. With fashion in the metaverse, we're not there yet, so who's to really say what's a good example of this? We're just going to have to wait and see. But let's take a step back. So in our first stage, we gathered information. We gathered information from internal leaders, from trend reports, and from competitors. And then our second stage, we plotted that against the Gartner hype cycle to say, where do we think these trends are in their journey? It's a lot of content, but you actually only care about 2 points. And that's our enlightenment slopes and our innovation triggers. The innovation trigger is where you want to invest your R&D efforts. This is the new trends and technology we want to investigate in. This is where we want to see what are the new startups and the research labs doing that we need to pay attention to in the future. Our enlightenment slopes are saying this is the first product market fit. This is the true user value, or the first glimmer of it at least. And how can we ensure that our products are the first ones doing something meaningful with this trend? So already we've taken a step of narrowing our focus just a bit, but we still need to push it further. So coming back to our 6 steps, we gathered information and we said, hey, market, what are the signals we need to be paying attention to? And then we digested against the Gartner hype cycle to say, what are the innovation triggers and where's the enlightenment slope? But now we want to focus further and say, of these trends, which is actually going to have a business impact that we need to design for? So we come to our second framework. It's a business impact probability matrix. And the name sucks, and I recognize that. But it does kind of exactly what it says it's going to do. On the one hand, we're going to talk about the business impact. We would be forced to pivot and respond to stay in business versus it's optional to respond. On our horizontal, we're going to talk about the probability. It's absolutely going to happen, or it's likely to happen. And here as designers and facilitators, you want to lead your company in having conversations about, hey, those trends that we just isolated, where do we think it lands? So again, this is not Zalando's actual perspective of it, but like if we were to have this conversation in Zalando, how might it look like? So maybe we would say, hey, hybrid fashion shows, we think that's just a fad. And while that's important for the world of fashion, we're e-commerce. We don't put on fashion shows, so we really don't need to respond to that. Or maybe we talk about gaming collaborations. And we would say, yeah, it's e-commerce, so we could respond because we are in the business of selling fashion. But again, it's not a must because it doesn't involve our warehouses, our logistics. It's not physical products that it's actually selling. And you go through and you have these conversations for all of the different trends. And it's super critical. This is not something to do in isolation. The future is not a product of your personal opinion. This is an exercise that you need to do with a diverse group of leaders in your organization. Because the value is not where you plot things on a matrix. It's the conversations that you're having, the debates and the disagreements, and then the eventual alignment about how important do we think this actually is. Once you've done all of that, again, we have a moment where you can say, it's a lot of data, but we don't need to pay attention to all of it. Because what actually matters is just the upper right-hand quadrant. What's the stuff that we think it's likely is going to happen and would have a business impact? We've now gone through another step of focusing where it's like, hey, all those trends that are out there, super cool. We don't need to work on it, and we don't need to throw our roadmaps out just to respond to them. So we found a couple of key trends that we care about. Now what do we do with them? Coming back to our steps, we gathered information on market trends and signals, and then we digested it through the Gartner hype cycle. We then said, hey, which of these trends actually have a business impact that we think is going to hit the market? But now we need to develop a perspective. What's the future that we want to build with this technology? So we need to provoke positions on possible responses. What is the future that we want to design? In this, we're going to do a third exercise, which is 2x2 provocations. This is an exercise that you can do and should do multiple times across multiple trends, where you're going to keep mashing them up and essentially saying, if we dialed trends up or down, what would happen? Let's take 2 trends at random for an example that we've isolated so far. We could take 3D clothing data and virtual reality. So, as we discussed with 3D clothing data, it's essential for us to have online experiences about fashion because we need to represent that fashion somehow. What's the catch? Well, fashion designers design in 2D, and to manually upload scans of garments is super costly and expensive. And with fast fashion, more and more garments are available every day, so it's impossible to keep up from a manual perspective. So we know 3D garment data matters, but we don't know what we can do with it. How do we respond? Let's look at virtual reality. We've been hearing since Oculus that virtual reality is the next big thing. And every time someone launches a new device, we all get excited that it's going to change the world, and then time and time again, it seems to be only used for gaming. Just this past year, Apple finally launched their Vision Pro, and everyone said, this is the moment, it's really going to happen. And it's 6 months later, and we already see that sales have slumped, and influencers have all created their content, but who's actually using it? So, we know VR matters, but we don't know to what extent it matters. What do? So we take these trends and we mash them up against a 2x2. And our different points of tension is going to be, we think about high adoption and low adoption. High adoption, everyone's using it, super big deal. Low adoption, no one's using it. What we want to do is go through these different quadrants and help imagine and brainstorm different scenarios of how would this actually look like in our business, so that we can understand what is the future we actually want to create with these trends. Let's walk through some of those examples. So we start with our upper right-hand quadrant. High adoption of 3D clothing data. Every garment has a digital twin online. We've solved the problem. We see high adoption of virtual reality. The price point came down. Everyone was super excited. It's as common as having an iPhone. Well, if you're designing for e-commerce, what does that look like? What does it mean when anyone has a VR headset and can try on garments online? You can now imagine any kind of outfit and style and have total purchase confidence before you even buy something. You can try on styles that you would never imagine in a million years, but it's because it's fun and you can envision it. And all of your friends have VR headsets, so now we have new opportunities for creating social fashion experiences in VR that we might not have otherwise had. If this future was true, how would our business respond? Let's move down to our lower right-hand quadrant. Everyone has VR headsets, everyone is loving them, but hey, we haven't solved the issue around 3D clothing data. We still just don't have enough available. So then we have to hypothesize, well, what would be the clothing data that we would have available? And maybe would think, hey, actually sneakers is the first thing, because the sneaker industry is most likely to be designing in 3D. It's the easiest products to scan. They come in relatively stable sizing. And so we don't have a total fashion e-commerce experience, but we can develop really great sneaker experiences in VR. And so now we need to design for thinking about what is the ultimate sneaker experience? How do you try sneakers on with different outfits? Can you customize your sneakers? Can you see what the heat map is of the fit and what the tread looks like in different scenarios? If we believe this future was true, how would we respond? Now we move over to our lower left-hand quadrant. We haven't solved the 3D clothing data issue, and VR headsets are just too expensive, no one's buying them. So it's not likely that this is going to be an at-home experience. Well, when is it worth a lot of effort to have a fashion metaverse experience? Maybe it's for the most important fashion moments in your life. And maybe that means your wedding is one of those moments. So maybe this isn't something that you experience at home. Maybe you're going into wedding salons and wedding boutiques, and you're using VR headsets to try on the wedding dress, and not just try on the wedding dress, but to imagine it in different scenarios, see it at the venue, see what it looks like in photographs, see what it looks like in different lightings and with your groom. If this was a future we believed in, how would our business respond? And lastly, we come to our upper quadrant, where we see that we have solved the issue of 3D clothing data. There's 3D data for everything. But the VR headsets are just too expensive. Not enough people have developed apps for it. And so people just really don't see the value of buying and using them. Who's most likely in the fashion world to be the first people to buy VR headsets? Now we can hypothesize that maybe it's fashion influencers and content creators. For them, it's super important to have the best content possible and to have a diverse content across all platforms. So maybe it's not even about designing e-commerce experiences, but how are we creating great fashion content experiences so that we're enabling our partner influencers to create the best content online possible? If we believe this future was true, how would our business respond? Taking a step back, we're talking about the same trends. We're just pushing and pulling them apart and saying, hey, if we dialed it up, if we dialed it down, how would that change the products we build, the way we design, the experiences? Because we might be really invested in a trend, but we don't know the trajectory it's about to take. We don't know how soon the tech's going to get good. We don't know how soon people are going to get excited about it. And we don't know how to adapt it into our current ecosystems and interfaces. And so we need to go through and really challenge ourselves to go beneath the surface of the hype and think about different possible scenarios of trend manifestation so that we can make educated guesses about where we really think it's going and what we actually want to be building. So let's come back to our process. We gathered information from internal leaders, trend reports, and the market. Then we digested that against the Gartner hype cycle to say, hey, which of these trends are at the right moment in their life cycle journey? We focused based on which of these trends have a business impact, and then we provoked our leaders to say, what's the future we are actually trying to build here? Now as designers, we have the mandate, we have the vision. This is the future we believe in. We need to take that message and story and share it with our organization and all of our teams so that everyone is aligned in what's the future we want to build. In the studio, we often work with short-form video, and that's really helpful for us because we're able to create emotional stories that give an impression of the experiences we want to build without over-indexing on all the details we haven't figured out yet. Because this is a recorded talk, I can't actually show you what one of those videos look like, but we'll look through a storyboard of what one of them might look like. So let's say our first foray into the fashion metaverse was thinking about realistic virtual try-on experiences. And we want to say, hey, how can we try inspiration on? Well, maybe the first step is that we need to help our users create photorealistic avatars. And it's essential that you can do that in the quickest and easiest way possible. What's the future of the fashion browsing experience if you could try any outfit on someone that looks like you? How does that change the way that you get excited and interact with fashion online? And how does that change the relationships that our users have with our products and fashion as a whole? So again, these are just 5 storyboards, but you can see that with a little bit of stock footage, stock imagery, and a couple of hero screens, you can really convey a story of where we're trying to go as an organization. So coming back to our 6 steps, we gathered information from the market, and then we digested against the hype cycle. We focused on what has business impact, and we aligned on what's the future we want our products to create. Then we took that vision, we crafted a story and brought it to our organization so that there's alignment and transparency across. All that's left to do is to iterate. Now, it wouldn't be a design conference talk if I didn't reference a dead 20th century war general. So, Eisenhower says, in preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. Oftentimes, what the studio does never sees the light of day. And that's okay. We're thinking 2 to 5 years in the future. We expect that to happen. It should be happening if we're making bold enough bets. Because something's going to change. We don't have a crystal ball, and good strategy is not meant to be a crystal ball. There's going to be a new competitor that pops up that we didn't imagine. There's going to be new tech that drops we didn't solve for. There's going to be new regulation that changes what's possible and what we're allowed to do. By going through this exercise, we're not just creating a future strategy. We are assessing what are all the possible scenarios that happen so that when inevitably shit hits the fan, we're prepared to pivot because we've already been thinking about what are all the other stories and the options that are out there. It's not our first time thinking about this. It's a misconception to think that good strategy predicts the future. In reality, good strategy is continuously adapting to the future. Seeing through the hype is one way to continuously adapt because it's going to help us craft business strategy by evaluating market trends through a design lens. And for one last time, I'll say it, but we're going to gather information on what's coming. Talk to your internal leaders. Talk to the competitor. Well, you can't talk to the competitors. Steal from competitors. Look at the trend reports. You're then going to digest that information against a Gartner hype cycle and say, where's the innovation and where's the product market fit? We're going to focus on what actually has business impact. And then we're going to provoke our leaders to say, hey, let's go deeper. What is the future we actually want to build? We'll craft what that future looks like to make sure we all know the story so that we can start planning how to bring it to life together. And then, when all of that gets thrown out the window, we're going to iterate and we're going to do it all over again. This is just one way that we do things at the studio in Zalando, but I'm super eager to hear how you all are thinking about future-proofing your businesses and how you're leading those conversations as designers. So thanks, Hatch. Let's connect and talk.